Okay, thanks you guys. So you could get started.
Okay. Well, I'm Lynn Kovach, and I am the owner of Polaris Land Surveying, and it is my own surveying company. I don't do any civil engineering or any other kind of engineering. I do purely land surveying. I've had the company for 20 years. I've been licensed for much longer than that. And I did not start out in college thinking that I was going to be a land surveyor. I was going to be a teacher. And I got into college and I found out that that wasn't the most exciting curriculum, that it didn't hold my interest. So I had a hard time staying in school. And so on one of the times that I dropped out of school, I got hired to work on a highway construction project and ended up finding out about surveying, and the rest is history, as they say. I went back to school, I got my degree, I ended up graduating from Fresno State, and which is a very good four-year school for land surveying, and they have civil engineering programs there as well. And it's a real advantage to get your degree, because when you go to be licensed, there is a requirement of 6 years of experience, but the 4-year degree counts for 4 of those 6 years. So then you only have to work for 2 years. No, it's not 8. It's still 6 here. It's 8 in Washington State. There are other states that have different requirements, but California is still 6 years. And you don't have to have a degree, but by getting a degree, you're prepared for the future. So it's very important, I think, to do that, no matter what you want to go forward with, whether it's civil engineering or land surveying. But so that's how I became a land surveyor. And it's always been an interesting career for me. I have always enjoyed the work itself, not always the people that I was working for. So I think, as Jeff Roper was saying, it's a choice of an individual who chooses to go out on their own. There is more work that has to be done that isn't just purely surveying, but it also means that I get to do things my own way. And that to me is very important. I'm kind of I guess he said he was a control freak. I guess I'm kind of a control freak, and my husband is nodding his head. So I like doing things what I consider the right way. And so I was going to talk about some of the projects. And Joanne, is it possible that I can share my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you can. Yeah, try it. I don't put any controls on it, so hopefully.
Okay, well, let's see. I'm going to start this, and this one, and share.
Yay, good.
All right, great. So this is a typical project that we would do for a homeowner. Somebody wants to know where their boundaries are. Maybe they want to build a fence. Maybe they want to build an addition. And so they call us up and they ask us to do a survey. We do the boundary, which is the red line that I'm showing you here. And we do a site plan showing the house as it exists, contours, all of that, the road, the driveway coming up. So this is a very, very typical kind of project. This one is right out in Carmel Valley, and it's just going to somebody's house and working there for the day. But that means that every day is a different day. So sometimes we go to a much larger project, and it's still the same kind of a project where somebody wants to build something. This gentleman wants to build a new house over in this area. And so for the county, they have to submit a boundary and a contours, which we got the contours mostly off of Google Earth. And we only did the contours in this specific area.
Excuse me, can they see the mouse?
Can you see my mouse winging around?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, I thought so.
Right.
All right. And this is an interesting survey because I started it a long time ago and I did it for the people who owned it. And they were a university, a private university that owned it, and they were trying to sell it. So there's a subdivision you can see right next door, and then there's a lot of big properties around it. So it was a very interesting survey to do, and it was a cool place to go, and is out in Carmel Valley as well. So these kinds of things are what we do for homeowners. And then the other kinds of projects we do for engineers. So we provide the base map that shows what's there on the site. So again, we do a boundary. We have to do the boundary to define the limits of the area. And then this one is a tank site for a water company. And they're going to expand and improve it. They were also going to improve the road that comes up to the tank site. And again, this is in Carmel Valley. And I kind of like doing water tanks because they're usually up on top of hills and you get a lot of really neat views. So this was in a subdivision that was done in like 1920. So it was an interesting subdivision in that way to go and do the project. So another kind of project that we do is a development project where we provide, again, the base map and we do the boundary. And this project, we had it flown for aerial topography. And so from the plane, just like you could do it with a drone, you can do it with a plane. They located all of the buildings. And then we overlaid the utility lines, and there's contours and the parking and everything that had to be shown of the existing conditions. So then the big outline was their overall property, and they're going to divide it into 5 parcels and try to sell it. So these are the kinds of projects that we do. These are typical kind of clients that we do. Now this one is in Salinas. It's over in that ag area of Salinas, but it's along a railroad track. And so that makes for an interesting boundary. And then the old boundary here, this property is one of the original ice companies that started with the Salinas Valley Produce when they started shipping lettuce and vegetables across the country. That's why it's right on the railroad tracks. They had to make ice in order to pack it to get it across the country. So it's an interesting story. It's still owned by the original family. So it's kind of cool to go back and see the history of those kinds of things. And now we also get to look at historical mapping. And this is an example of sectionalized land. So they call it the Public Land Survey System. And it is how the country, basically the United States west of Ohio, is divided into squares. It's a grid system that goes all across the country. And when you fly, you can see these grid on the ground. You see the squares, especially in the rural areas. You can see those giant squares. This is how it all got started. So they were out surveying in California from 1860 to 1890, basically.
1854 to 1859 was the original designations here, and then that map's 1907.
Right. And so they started with a 6 mile by 6 mile square and then divided it up into 1 mile squares. And then that's how they were able to get land into the hands of regular people. with homesteading, and they gave it to soldiers and things like that. But this is the base map that you have to start with when you're doing a survey that's in that kind of country. So you have to learn how to understand this map. And then,
Then it rolls into.
and it also, yeah, it also abuts the Rancho land. So this one is kind of an interesting one because it's adjacent to the ranchos. Then we have to dig deeper, and we go into historical research to find out who owned the property and what kind of configurations they had before we can go on. And then so part of that research is looking at really old maps of various kinds. And this is a really interesting survey because this township was resurveyed in like 1994. And the survey company that did it didn't do a proper job. And so now we're trying to go back in and fix it by recording new maps. So part of what we're going to do is to record new maps with the county to show the proper division of the property. So this is what we're doing right now. It's again, it's farming country. You can see we've got the Google Earth photos in the background, and the farmer is dividing the land now to align with the farming use of the property rather than big boxes that just don't make any sense in California. This is a road that runs up along here. So they're making that one of their division lines. And this is a road here. So that makes sense to have it on that, where it's in the flat country, this big boxes make sense. But when you get up into the hills, which is all of this cattle country, it doesn't make sense anymore. And so we're helping them divide it up. So again, it's another development kind of thing. Let me see now. I'm gonna get rid of this. I've got something hiding my tabs here. Okay. This is another survey that we did for another agricultural client. And this is over by Hollister. Now, this one is interesting because there was agriculture here. There were greenhouses, and the greenhouses got abandoned, and the property sat for a long time. But over time, the things grew up around it. And so we have Highway 156 over here that expanded and expanded, and it's now one of the boundaries. We have Orchard Road, which runs right through the middle of the property, which it didn't in the first place. And the reason I know that again is historical research. This is a 1907 map, and this is the highway shown over here as a dirt road. The road that goes by the property isn't there at all, but this is important because this property that we're at is right here, and they have rights to this reservoir and to the irrigation ditch that ran from there. So having to figure out where all of these things are, it becomes historical Sherlock Holmes whodunit, kind of a detective story to find out all the clues. So it becomes really interesting. And then just for fun, I threw in this really cool old map of San Benito County back from when they did maps and they made them all pretty. These are all hand drawn. This is, can't read it, 1891. And they put pictures. They were very proud of their courthouse. Still there pretty much. And then the other kind of mapping that we do is we do GIS mapping for resource management. And so this is a map to help a neighborhood do fire management and they've broken it up into groups. And this kind of a tool is really helpful for lay people to understand what group they're supposed to be in, how they're supposed to be organized. And so those are pretty much all of the kinds of surveys that we do. And every one of them is fun. They're all an interesting thing to do. Different days, you're in different places with new challenges, and it's a lot of fun. Let's see now. So you wanted us to talk a little bit also about the career, what the
Yeah. Before you go
outlook.
on though, Lynn, I think it's so interesting because you're involving not only the civil engineering part, but you're looking at history, which is an added benefit of making what you're doing very fun.
Right.
Hey, before you go into the opportunities for surveying, because I know Hans, you texted me recently that you're looking for, that we need to inspire more people to go into surveying. Before we go to that, Lynn, I'm going to have you not take your sharing away for a minute.
Okay.
And I want to see everybody, I want to go back and see if I could see everybody's faces. And let me go back. I see. So, what do you guys, I want to hear some questions that you have about the projects. Lynn, do
We
you
kind of
main,
fast.
I know. Is it mostly in San Benito County or are you in Monterey County too? And
Right. We're mostly in Monterey County. We do some work in San Benito. We do a little bit of work in Santa Cruz,
okay,
Santa Clara. Monterey County is very big.
okay.
It
It's
goes very much further south, and we go all the way south. Some of the agricultural stuff, with all the vineyards and all of that, we've helped develop some of those areas. And so that's pretty far south. We're currently working in Big Sur. We're doing another sectionalized land project where we're out at the edge of the Ventana Wilderness area. And so we have to go out. I mean, we're so far out that we have to go out and camp out overnight, just to make it make sense. When it takes an hour and a half to get there, it kind of blows your day.
okay. So what are some questions you guys have? Otherwise, I'll keep asking questions. I always have questions.
Well, Joanne, can I add a little bit to
Yes.
this?
Yeah, please. And Hans, I'd like you to just tell them your background as well.
Well, my background is kind of a curvy road. I have a graduate degree in mechanical engineering, and initially I was in marine engineering out in ocean going ships and the like, but I had a family connection. I had an interest in precision instruments and had a family connection. So it wound up, I got in being involved as a salesman for surveying instruments. And I did that out in California now for in excess of 40 years, having my own dealership, selling instruments and training surveyors on new technologies. For a number of years, I'd come down to Cabrillo College in order to educate them on GPS, as that was back then an up and coming new technology. Nowadays, everybody takes it for granted. But back in the early days, and we're talking about like 1987 and the late 80s and early 90s, I spent a lot of time even training registered land surveyors on how GPS worked and how to apply it and how to use those tools. And I say, but that's ancient history nowadays. And that was one of the most exciting things, was taking and educating surveyors on that. I since retired from the surveying instrument business, but since my wife is a land surveyor and I've worked with land surveyors for over 40 years, so I'm still active part-time with her in helping out with the business. Now, hopefully I could bore you to tears, but we don't have enough time to go on the rest of my history. But I think the one most important message here is that as a college student or as a young professional, don't pin yourself into just thinking that, well, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to do, because you never know what gets thrown your way, and all of a sudden you deviate and you go one direction or the other because of what's interesting. I'll use two examples. One of them, I've known of people that want to go into the nursing profession and not necessarily be a doctor, but still go into the medical profession. And then sure enough, once they get into college, they find out that, oh, I'm a bit queasy at the sight of blood. This is not going to work, you know? So they get into pharmaceuticals, or they get into something else involved with the medical field. And the same thing can happen with surveyors and others also. It's a matter of keep your eyes and ears open there to what comes along. And there is another college in the area that we have we've picked up interns from, and the students in this case are in environmental sciences, and it's been more than a couple of them that say, I like environmental sciences, I like being outside, I like doing the research outside and stuff, but it's a matter of after a while of just doing stream study after stream study and taking dirt samples and counting fish or frogs. They said there's got to be more to it than this, and they've gotten over into the land surveying profession instead. So anyway, just a couple examples. Now, one thing to keep in mind with land surveying is that by itself, it's almost invisible to the average lay person out there. And I mean, Jeff Roper, he explains about he's involved with an entire project, from the surveying to the engineers and seeing the project finished, where in our case, and as land surveyors, we're almost invisible. We come in, we're the very first people out on a project. Think about the Transcontinental Railroad. And before anybody started building the railroad, there were surveyors that were going across the United States and over the Sierras trying to figure out how to make this happen. Now, I know that's ancient history, you know, for us, but let's pretend that Cabrillo College is looking to take and to put in a satellite campus. Oh, I don't know, in Hollister, in Merced, we'll just pick a city. One of the first things that would happen would be somebody from Cabrillo would be contacting a land surveyor and saying, listen, we're looking at this piece of property here. We haven't bought one yet, or we're looking at that one. Would you go in and survey that so that we know the boundaries, so that we can go to the city or county and find out what's involved? And then, you know, and in some cases, the project goes ahead. In some cases, they say, well, logistically, that's not going to work out for whatever reason, and so the project doesn't happen. But still, the land surveyor is in there to tell you what's what is there, and then the people with the money, the people with the whatever it happens to be, that you know, decides to go ahead with it or not, or which is the better piece of property to purchase in order to put that satellite campus in there. And even private landowners will take in, they're looking at a piece of property, they want to put their dream house on it. They haven't bought it yet, but they'll come to Lynn or a surveyor and say, could you take and verify what the boundary is here, because we think this is a perfect building site, only to have Lynn inform them afterwards that, well, the real estate agent didn't really give you the whole picture. That one site you're looking at, that's not on your property. You can't build your house there. And so, you know, the real estate transaction doesn't go through. So anyway, just something to think of. We're always kind of on the invisible end of things before anything else. But the next question might be for you is, what does a property need to be surveyed? Aren't they all done by now? You know, you'd think after Lynn showed you maps of over 150 of the 1850s, 1860s, isn't it all finished? Well, corners get lost. They get hidden, they get buried, they get destroyed in construction, whether it's by accident or whatever. You know, improvements happen, whether it's a fence, whether it's a road, it's an intersection or whatever. And so things need to be based on historical evidence, need to go out to surrounding properties in order to bring those property corners back into place. So it's retracing history of what happened before, previous landowners, as Lynn showed you some maps, in some cases being, as she said, a Sherlock Holmes of going back a long, long ways away. Or it could be something as simple as the landowner wants to put a fence line in, but they say, I don't know where where the line runs, because the corners may be a couple 100 feet apart, and in between trees or other obstacles, I can't see from one corner to the next. So can you show me where that line runs so that I can determine where to put my fence, or to make sure that the neighbor isn't going to put a pool across my fence, or whatever it happens to be. So things like that to think about, you know, and also consider that with the earlier surveyors, they didn't have GPS, they didn't have calculators, they didn't have electronics. The tools that they used were great tools for them to use at that time, whether it's the 1870s, whether it's the 1930s, whether it's the 1960s, you know. And so they did the best they could based on using those tools, writing everything down by hand with pencil and paper, and doing the trigonometry, doing the math right out in the field with hand calculators and stuff, and not electronic ones either, you know. So where nowadays we have all the advantage of GPS and electronic measurements and electronic, you know, the computers and all the other stuff to make life easier. So anyway, that's some of the things to think about when it comes around being a surveyor, you know. And we take a look at the project. Lynn's interest in boundary and stuff is that we only do the front end of the project. There's a lot to say with what Jeff and other engineering, Jeff, you know, being a surveyor and an engineer, he likes to look at that final project and say, yeah, I built that, and I built this, you know, not with hammer and nails, but he actually did the design, and then it comes to being a project finished where we're really just on the front end of it. But there's satisfaction there too in solving those puzzles. So hope that helped a little bit.
That was really good. And then would you like to talk about like job prospects? And I know the Hans, you want us to start going out to high schools to get more kids interested in surveying. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, this is being that land surveying, and nowadays, by the way, and this will be on the quiz. Professor Penn's already said there will be a quiz, right? The geomatics is the actual official professional term nowadays for land surveying, because of it encompasses more than just doing a boundary. There's the use of drones. There's the use of GIS and BIM, and all these other three-dimensional tools in order to take and to do mapping depending on what the application is. So, and the full understanding of coordinates and coordinate systems and least squares adjustment and data analysis and stuff. So it's geomatics is the full, even though it's still when you get your license, it's a license as a professional land surveyor, but geomatics is more all encompassing and the like. And so there's been an ongoing effort, not just by me, but a lot of people recognizing that as more technology comes along, there's more and more demand all the time for land surveyors, whether it's as a private surveying firm, whether it's a government agency on the federal, on the state, on the county level, and even in forensics, with accident mapping and stuff like that nowadays, and having it where you've got qualified professionals that understand the coordinates and the interpolation of different data and putting it all together. And there's, as an example, there's a lot of people, real estate agents and others, you talk about drones, and everybody says, well, I can fly that drone and I can take some aerial photos for you. But nobody can take and specifically tell you, well, what kind of accuracy are we talking about here? in that stitching of all of those images, what was the resolution on the pixels, and how do you know that in fact it accurately fits the ground, not to the foot or not to 10 feet, but to surveying to the 100th of a foot. And most drone operators said, well, the pictures look pretty good, you know, but you need a professional that understands the math to be able to take and to do the analysis and the quality, the QA/QC of that data to say, listen, it is the surveying accuracy. You can design off of that, you know, and so there's an ongoing push for where it would be a dream to be able to take every one of you civil engineering and other students and convince you to become land surveyors instead. But that's not going to happen. And the most important message here, I believe, is for a potential civil engineering student to understand what the value is that the land surveyor brings to the table for you, and how you have to have this cooperative arrangement, because the engineer needs that surveying data in order to move forward. And if it's not good data, they're going to look bad too, or eventually find. But it's trying to educate back on, even at the high school level, to get through STEM and other, you know, through getting the kids interested in moving forward, to whether they choose to go to college to become a civil engineer or a surveyor, or whether they say, well, college isn't really, I'm not ready for that, but I'd like to get into the technical field of being an intern or a technical assistant, you know, on a surveying crew. And that's really where where my inquiry to you, came about to start with, is really doing more work even at the high school level. And because some students in high school know where they want to go to college, and others saying, well, I'm not quite ready for college yet, but I don't want to flip burgers at McDonald's, and I don't want to just take a job at you know, whatever Kmart or something else, where I'd like to do something that is rewarding and I can go to college later on, or say, hey, this is fun, you know, and earn a better living than just you know. Anyway, so you get the idea where I'm coming from. Yeah.
And I think maybe students know about, well, what is engineering, right? And then they might choose civil over mechanical or electrical, but having this environment where the students are taking a surveying class, one, and then introducing them to you guys, they're learning about other possibilities within the future career. And I know my students always want internships, and it seems like it's pretty easy for me to find internships with them for civils, as long as they take the surveying class and the engineering 25, because then they have some CAD experience and they have surveying experience and they could get placed. So yeah, it'll be fun to talk to this group after they just heard from the four of you and see what their direction is.
And have reach out to us if somebody's interested in an internship in the direction of surveying, and because it's not just us, but there are certainly other firms that we can take, and other professional surveying firms that we can put them in touch with to see who has a position that's available. So
Yeah, I think I'm gonna put this list together, get students who are interested to fill out the information, and then I could pass it on to all four of you, and we could spread it to CLSA.
right.
And yeah, okay,
I mean,
great.
we would take it then to the local CLSA chapter meeting, and about
Right.
that, CLSA is the California Land Surveyors Association, and be able to, you know, pass it on from there, and see who has a position available. But
Yeah.
the importance. I come from an education background of having hands-on experience, so not just book work and school work. And back in my days, you called it blackboard. You know, I don't know if you use chalk anymore, but probably not. But also having what we refer to as street smarts, And that is that having it where you've been out in the field, you put the boots on, you understand what the uh, uh, whether it's for civil engineering, whether it's for land surveying, or whatever you could go to school to study engineering to become an automotive engineer. And if you don't know how to handle a wrench when all is said and done, because they're not going to teach you, it's college, but it's a matter of still, and it's not that you're going to wrench all your life. It's still a matter of understanding what it means to torque bolts and stuff. So, you can walk the walk and talk the talk of the other people you're working with,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important.
Yeah.
And internships are the most important way to get jobs after college. Is if you work during school, then you have a leg up on anybody who has no experience, because employers are looking for some kind of experience to show that you have an interest and an aptitude to be able to do it. And in surveying, there are many levels of ways to get employed. There's the lowly chainman who just stands around in the field. Now, these days, we don't actually tape anything very much. We have a stick that you walk around with, but is kind of the grunt on the crew. And then as people get more and more experience, they learn how to operate instruments and understand what points need to be shot in the field. Why are we shooting these things? And that all takes hands-on experience. And that's what internships are really good for.
Yeah.
And even if you choose to be a civil engineer, it's good to have a land surveying background, because then you understand how to speak to the surveyor to get the data that you need for your design project.
Yeah. And or the appreciation of where this data came from in the first place, and the logistics of what it took to collect it. Some projects are more difficult than others, but still it's a matter of having that appreciation for, how did this map get generated?
Yeah.
And one other thing with internships and with street smarts, it's unfortunately, even civil engineers have a better opportunity in regards to employment coming out of college than, let's say, if you're going to be an accountant or other, other disciplines where there's tens of thousands of, the HR department looking at all of these resumes and trying to pick one from the next. Fortunately, a civil engineer is in higher demand than a lot of other degree programs. But still, it's a matter of when you can have on your resume to start with other things such as not just sports and stuff like that, but having it where you've got internship. And I worked for this one summer and I worked for there. And, all of a sudden that puts you a couple of possibly head and shoulders above the, about the other resumes that they're looking at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to put in a plug here for Fresno State, because if you go into the land surveying program in Fresno State, there is so much scholarship money. They give away incredible amounts of scholarship money to students every single year. The community, the land surveying community, supports the students over there. And it is a really lovely symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, because Fresno State is the only state in California, the only university in California that has a land surveying degree, geomatic engineering. So that means all the surveyors in the whole state are going to be, when they're donating, they're going to be donating to that program. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Lynn.
Cal Poly Pomona, I think, is another one that
I don't know that they actually have a 4-year degree, but
No,
it's not only one
Yeah.
of the few in California, it's one of the few in the country.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Oh,
there
wow.
are not that many 4-year degrees in land surveying in this country. And Fresno State is one of the
Wow.
stars, actually.
Okay. Wow. Thanks for telling me that, Lynn.
And I am on their advisory council as a part of that degree program that
Wow.
have been for 25 years. So
Yeah.
I
Great.
we didn't mean to do a plug here for Fresno State.
Oh, it's great.
But it's a matter of if somebody who is seriously focused in becoming a land surveyor, that's one
Yeah.
direction to think about. Yeah.
Well, I also think that even if the students decide they want to get a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, you know, you could specialize in surveying. If you go to Fresno State, you know that there will be many courses to take to learn more about surveying or get a minor in surveying. Because in any engineering, I mean, many of you took the engineering 5 class where no matter what bachelor's degree you get in senior year, there's 4 technical electives and you get to choose those in your specialty. And if you go to a university that has surveying, you could choose your specialty as surveying, and that's going to put you're going to know more about surveying than someone who gets a civil engineering degree outside of Fresno. So I think that plug for Fresno is great, especially if you love surveying. I mean, you're going to be more outside surveying than you will if you're a civil engineer.
Oh, yeah.
And we're not on the East
outside.
Coast, so it's not snowing at night. You know, it's beautiful all the time. All right. Well, thank you so much, you guys. And Lynn, thanks so much for bringing maps to share, because the visuals is always helpful. So
It'll make
you
it
are,
really interesting.
yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, you guys. Good night, Lynn and Hans.
It's unfortunate that we don't have the time to really take in with some of the maps she brought up to really go into more intimate detail on what was involved, because there's a lot of stories behind that in where you had to do the research. You know what? Anyway, one recent project in some of the sectionalized land as they were out looking for an old corner, an old, what was it, a 6x6 fence post, something like that, an 8x8 fence post. And then after multiple days on the job, then finally one of the landowners that they were talking to, he says, "Oh, I think I have that one in my living room. It fell over many years ago and it had interesting writing on it, but I didn't think to throw it out because, but I didn't leave it out in the field here." So yeah, so they had saved it, but it was in his living room, you know.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. He sent me a picture of it. That's the corner we were looking for. Yeah.
Well, Lynn, remember we had talked about the Women in Science and Engineering Club coming to visit you sometime, and then we went into the pandemic, but we'll do that.
Yep.
That would be great.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. Good night to you guys.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting us, and it was lovely to speak to you all tonight.